Hi everyone. So this year is something that I've wanted to do for quite a while, and since it's June and we're all getting ready to head out to Cannes, I thought it's a now or never situation. So I have been thinking about a handful of topics in the past, just things that I'm personally passionate about and things that come up over and over again in conversations with peers, but also with clients. And rather than pretending that I'm having all the answers, I thought it's much more interesting and also real to invite people who are experts in these areas and learn from them. So the idea is pretty simple. I'm going to have a 20-minute conversation here with an expert every other week, and asking lots of questions, and hopefully others, you guys will also find the answers useful. And one of the first topics, and actually one of my favorite topics, is storytelling. People who work with me for quite a while, for them it's not going to be a surprise at all. It is something I am discussing with countless clients since years. It's also something that comes up again and again. It's also one of these things that everyone agrees that is super important, but surprisingly, very few organizations or teams actually get it right and feel confident about that topic. So I'm very excited and honored that you, Grant, agreed to join me today. We're going to talk about some common mistakes that both of us have seen companies making when it comes to storytelling, what sets great storytelling apart, and hopefully give people a few practical ideas that they can take away from this into their day-to-day. And before we dive in, maybe let's start with you. Yes, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, your background?
I'd like to say first of all, thank you very much for inviting me on. I'm honoured, and so my name's Grant Feller, and I run a company called EveryRung. The idea of every rung on the storytelling ladder, and it's interesting you talked about pretending you know all the answers, because I used to be a journalist to quite a high level in the UK. So I spent my entire career pretending that I had all of the answers. But I spent almost 30 years in newsrooms, national news organisations here in the UK, in broadcasting studios for the radio, where I helped present a breakfast show, and I set up a couple of .coms in the UK, WebMD being one of the biggest ones. And throughout all of my career as a journalist, it was all about storytelling. And so around about 10, 12 years ago now, I decided that I would just try to reinvent myself, and I literally decided to start again, because I kind of, if I'm being honest, fell out of love with journalism. But everyone in the business world was talking about storytelling, and everyone was talking particularly about data and insights, and this was a world that I didn't know at all. And so I tried to kind of educate myself, if you like. And one of the very first experiences that I had, I had two sides to what I do. I do a lot of storytelling, and I do a lot of the creative bit, and then creating narratives and speeches and thought leadership. But I also go into companies and I help train them to be better storytellers. And I had an experience very early on in my career in which a company, a very large healthcare company, asked me to create a new narrative for them. And they handed me all of these documents, huge insights documents, the stuff that we all know, right? 120-page PowerPoints filled with data. And somebody very high up in this organization said to me, Grant, see if you can find some material here. And I said, well, have you ever thought about kind of making them more readable? Because there's gold dust in here and no one's reading it. And they said, well, I know this is the way it's always been done. And so I thought to myself, why is it always been done like that? Why not use all of those techniques in journalism and that I understood from the newsroom and put them into a completely different environment? And so over the last decade or so, I've been helping companies think like journalists, not behave like journalists. I mean, we would never want anyone to do that, but to think like journalists and to use all of those techniques in the newsroom to make their work more influential, so that people take decisions, so that people remember, so that the collaboration techniques are enhanced. And all of these things. And I know that you and I have spoken about why companies often get it wrong and the mistakes they make. And so that's what I do. I go into companies and I help them understand why they're making mistakes and use journalistic techniques to correct them. So that's me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I mean, like, if we speak about companies, we're really speaking about the largest companies on this planet. So it's going to be great to hear your thoughts and get your advice on a couple of things. I have been, and I shared these upfront with you, I've been thinking about like the most common mistakes that I've stumbled across over the last couple of years when it comes to storytelling. I picked 5. So I would love to, go through them one by one and get
Sure.
your initial thoughts, reactions, what you have seen in your work with companies as well. And then maybe, if relevant, get a couple of advices from you here. And you've just been speaking about these insane amounts of data that we especially see in insights teams. So that really fits nicely into one of the mistakes, which is I called it drowning people in data and calling it a story. So I've seen many decks where stakeholders just throw in every possible number. And it almost feels like the more numbers and data is being reflected, the better. But I get the feeling that a lot of companies really struggle to decide what to leave out and what to focus on.
Yeah.
So that's the first kind of perspective that I would like
And
to
that,
get from you.
and you talked about big companies, and the larger the company, the more difficult this is. And I think that's because, okay, let's think about journalism for a second. That we are swimming in facts. There are so many facts for every single story. And so what we try to do is we sit down and we have conversations with ourselves and with each others and with editors, and we kind of say, what matters now? Okay, all of these facts are very valuable, but if I want people to remember and most importantly to care and to grab their attention, what can I leave out? So almost the very first question that we ask ourselves is, okay, what can go? What can we save for another day, or what could we put at the end of a story, i.e., the equivalent of your appendix? What we're very good at having this kind of gut instinct, but also a plan about what can we leave out. And I find it quite interesting working with organizations, especially those insight specialists, because you love data and you love all of these insights. And I get the feeling that sometimes you can't decide what to love more than other bits. You know what I mean? Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely.
And so I do think that there is a way of solving this. And it's like, okay, in all of journalism, whether you're going to watch something on the TV tonight, or listen on the radio, or read something when you're scrolling on your phones, or hopefully buy a newspaper, which I know no one does anymore, but you're looking at headlines. The headline is the thing that grabs your attention. And so in the story process, the storytelling is kind of the last bit. You've got to make your story, you've got to find your story, and then you've got to make your story, and then you've got to tell your story. And one of the best ways of doing that is starting with a headline. So often, companies and individuals, let's just imagine a single slide, okay? And you've got loads of material, and the mistake that you make is that you want to put more material on because you're looking at it and you say, actually, I need to put that in, I need to put that in. And then when you've done it, you then say, okay, so what's the headline? If you do it in the opposite way, if you start with a headline and say, what is the message that I really want to get across here? What that does is it focuses your attention, and it means that you are compelled to put in the data that matters, that matches your headline, and everything else can go somewhere else. So I love working within your industry because I love facts, but I don't like too many facts because I know that spoils the story. I mean, you know, if you think about anything that you read, right? We don't have too many facts in a story, just enough to make you interested.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, I think that is a great advice, starting with the headlines. And sorry, I'm actually taking notes.
No. Oh, well, that's great. I mean, okay, I hope everyone is when they're listening to this. But yeah, start with a headline, and this is the bit that's really difficult. Not more than 10 words.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, 10 words. What that does is it forces you to be even sharper. And this is the other problem that I see in data storytelling. The sharpness, um, or stories are dulled because the headline is too long, or you're still trying to put too much into it.
Yeah.
So another. If I'm giving pieces of advice, I hope you don't mind pieces of advice. But if you have more than two ands in your sentence, it's wrong. So one and 10 words. Okay? I'm giving some really great nuggets for free here. I hope people are taking notes.
Yes, I do certainly. And the two ends is something I personally do very often if I feel like I need to combine stuff to make it come together in one sentence. Okay, perfect, cool. Let's move on with the next one because that is something that I've seen a lot of times as well, which is forgetting that behind all of this data and behind all of these numbers and percentages, there are actually real people behind it. And especially in insights teams, I have observed that the bigger the data set, the easier it is to forget about the real people, their fears, their motivations. So would love to get your thoughts on that. Because my personal opinion on this is that for me, how I consume is that one human story will always land better with me than a slide full of numbers and percentages. But yeah, how are you speaking about that with companies? How do you make that part of your trainings?
Well, okay, let me just. I'm going to give you an example that happened this week. A large telecoms company that I am helping to tell an internal story about behaviors and how they can craft better communications to match their customers' behaviors. And what I found interesting was that there's 3 chapters to the story that they've created, and they have in each chapter it's what we have found on like 3 different slides. Okay, basically lots and pieces of great data, graphs and pie charts and stuff that
We love pie
anyway,
charts.
you know. And then the last slide on each section is quotes from the consumers themselves. Now, these quotes were absolute gold dust because what they showed was something that the data didn't have, which were feelings and emotions. And I said I was being quite provocative in this session, and I said, why are these the last things in your chapters? And there was like silence in the room. And then somebody said, actually, yeah, why? And so part of I'm quite provocative, if you like, or not that provocative, but I just wanted to ask questions because that emotional bit is the most important thing. So when you're in journalism, in a newsroom, you've got a great idea, and there is no way that it's going to go into the newspaper or onto the website, whatever, unless you have somebody to eloquently describe what the feelings are about how they're impacted by that story. All great journalism is about people. And so we are thinking about always what they feel. But this is the key question. We're always saying, why should I care? Why should I care? I don't care about data. I'm sorry. I know I should. I don't care about facts. Obviously, I care about facts. The most important thing that I care about is how people feel and the impact it's had on their lives. And so one of the other things that journalists do when you're coming into a newsroom, and I've worked for right wing, I've worked for left wing, I've worked for straight down the middle, independent, and I leave all of my prejudices at the door, all of my habits, if you like. I try to get into the head of the audience, always thinking about the audience, why they should care. So my piece of advice on this, when it's about human storytelling, is ask yourself that simple question: why do I care? And I know it sounds a bit, bland and kind of obvious, but when you ask that, you will then very quickly morph into, okay, but why do they care? Or what's going on in their lives that makes me care?
Yeah.
And so that's how I do it anyway. Tell me if that feels kind of resonant to you.
Absolutely. And I think that goes back to, and it's something that I've read for a million times, like ask the why whenever you can. But I think this is a nice different angle to it. So like trying to really get into those hats. Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes total
That
sense.
that why thing is like, I mean, Simon Sinek wrote a really great book. I think, I can't remember what it's called. Is it Why Comes First, or I can't remember, but it's about why. And I've always felt that it doesn't go far enough. It's like, why do I care? And in the newsroom, it's very an intense environment, and you're constantly being told by your colleagues, but mostly by the editors, come on, Grant, I don't care. Make me care. Why do I care? And by putting the person at the front of the story, you solve that issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And now we've spoken about like things like what sticks with you and like that emotion is what is like most memorable. And I think that is actually fitting quite nicely to another common mistake that I've written down here, which is, and that also applies to myself, playing it safe instead of trying to make things stick. So a lot of companies and teams, and I will include myself, and a lot of Germans will be able to relate to this. A lot of us want their stories to be accurate, defensible, which I think is fair enough, but it kind of comes at the cost of the story being memorable. And we just spoke about that. Emotion is what makes it memorable and what makes it stick much more than the story being correct or striving for it to be perfect. So I would love to get your perspective because I feel like that is something where I can probably take away a lot from you as well.
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes people mistake my approach to storytelling or journalistic storytelling as playing hard and fast with the facts or being loose. I mean, it's not like that at all. It is not like that. So, when a few years ago, I work a lot with consumer companies, okay, and I wanted to really expand my client base working with pharma companies because I have a health background. And I now work with quite a few major pharma companies because storytelling is so important internally. And they didn't like the word storytelling, especially journalistic storytelling, because they felt it was somehow shallow, maybe, not and not concentrating on the facts and truth. It's not like that at all, but that was their feeling. So I changed my approaches to them and my pitches, and I talked about tactical storytelling. So I now talk about tactical storytelling all the time because tactical means something much more powerful, I think. It means, I'm going to ask you in a second what you think it means, but I think it means being more strategic, thinking about decisions, thinking about end goals. Tell me what I'm asking you. I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot now.
No, no,
But
all good.
what does that word mean for you, tactical?
Yeah, to me, it feels so. First of all, it gives me a safer feeling. If I were to work for a health company, and I've worked with many as well, especially German pharma companies, but it gives me a safer feeling. I think tactical for me implies that I am taking the broader picture into consideration. So I think about everything that's important, especially in healthcare. There are a lot of legal restrictions in the way that you are able to communicate things and so on and so forth. So tactical really, to me, means, yeah, how you said, that it's a bit more strategic, not just a quick story that we
Yeah.
push out, but really something that fits together with all the other initiatives that may be going on and the language that the company may be using elsewhere.
So you're thinking about so many of you, you're thinking about all the right things. You're right, and for me, the key thing is decisions. So all of our stories, in whatever company we're working for, in whatever we're doing, whether we're writing an email or whether we're compiling a massive deck, it's about helping people make decisions, sometimes influencing them to do something, sometimes persuading them,
Yeah.
or agreeing with them, or saying, you know what, this decision is the right thing to do. It's always about decision making. And so you talked about, playing safe instead of making it stick. And so that's what tactical storytelling does. It forces you to say, okay, what's the decision that's going to be made here? Or what kind of decision does the CMO want to make? Or the CEO? I mean, everything should be, all work in some way should be trying to help him or her right at the top of a company make the right decisions. And this for me this was like the revelation for me when all of those years ago when I worked with this company, and it was the insights team that had given me all this material, and their influence was not as strong as it should be, because I was looking at this material and I thinking, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. The CEO surely should be making decisions on the back of this, and they weren't, because the material wasn't traveling up high enough and fast enough for those decisions to be made. So when you are telling a story, when you're creating your story, you've got to think about, you've got to think, okay, in the newsroom, I'm sitting there thinking about a story, and I'm saying to myself, before I've written a word, I say to myself, okay, after the person has read my story, I want them to feel elated, feel worried, buy this, or do this, find this, whatever. I am thinking about the actions that I want my audience to take, or the feelings, the emotions that I want them to have. That is my guide. The headline is my guide, but also this sense of starting with the audience in mind. And that is how to take yourself away from this kind of safe space that you spoke about, because you are, again, compelling yourself in these stories to say, to focus on the actions that people are going to be taking.
Yeah.
I sometimes worry I'm babbling on. I hope I'm not babbling on, but
No,
but
no, not at all, not at all. And I think that is such a good point. It's this, you hear that so many times, starting with the end in mind. But that really resonated well with me, thinking about what you want to create, what action you want to trigger
yeah.
with that story. Yeah.
And by the way, Joy, if you don't mind me saying, some of these phrases that we use, starting with the end in mind, things like that, and the why and stuff like that, they really do matter. They really are good. But I sometimes think that we don't say, okay, start with the end in mind. But what do I mean by that? We don't interrogate sometimes our approaches enough, and we push ourselves a little bit harder. And that's one way of pushing yourself a little bit harder, to say, how am I going to help someone make a decision with this story? And how can I then construct this story so that I can influence them, persuade them? Influence is a big word.
Influence is a big word. Yeah, I agree to that. And you just said something that I took note of, which was story need to travel fast enough. That brings me to, and I cannot believe that we're talking since 13 minutes and we have not for once spoken about AI. I'm a little bit proud, but let's speak about that for a second, because it came to my attention when you spoke about the stories having to travel fast. Because obviously AI is oftentimes put into the context of enabling you to do things faster and more efficient. I want to speak about how your view is on outsourcing stories to AI. I oftentimes see teams that do that, but then wonder why the story might feel hollow. And I've heard someone saying in a panel the other day that the result of too much AI is that the output may look like a story, but it actually reads like nobody wrote it. Would love to hear your thoughts.
That word work slop. I've got a real concern about one of the words you just used, which goes to the heart of this, is outsourcing. Outsourcing implies kind of pressing a button and kind of, and waiting for something to come back and not really thinking about it hard enough. AI is the most fantastic tool if we work with it, not outsourcing it, not that sense of outsourcing it. We need to be at the beginning and the end of this process of using AI. And we need to be better at asking more intelligent questions of AI, so that AI, if sometimes I think about AI as an intern, as the smartest intern I'm ever going to have, smarter than me, but asking questions and kind of getting this stuff back and then saying, okay, thank you. Now, what's the story? And I start, honestly, I'm start again. I did it this morning for a piece of work that I'm doing for myself. And I started with some questions and I got all of this material back. And then I looked at the material and I said, okay, that's interesting. Now I need to ask a different question, actually. And now I need to change my mind, or I need to be agile. So AI, it doesn't provide the answer. It provides some answers that lead you to ask better questions and smarter questions. And I think that we can be lazy. AI can make us lazy and stop us, or mean that we stop the thought process. I think I'm not here to talk about my business and etc. I don't want to do that, but I am going to say to you that in the last 2 years, I've had more work from clients who have been using AI, and it's really interesting. So a friend of mine who's he's the CEO of a large media company, and he said to me about 2 or 3 years ago, he said, Grant, you're in trouble. And you need to this thing is coming and it's going to take all of your work away. And of course, when he said this, because he's a very, very powerful person, and I thought, I'm not allowed to swear on this podcast, but I thought to myself, and then what happened was that companies are using it and they're coming to me saying, you know what, it's not really working, or can you take what we've done with AI and turn it into something more interesting? So my piece of advice here is, yes, be there at the beginning, be there at the end, but most importantly, ask better questions. And there's something I talk about in my training, which is question storming. So brainstorming, which we use AI for, is what happens with brainstorming is that you're very reluctant to challenge an idea because it kind of feels ready formed. You're in a brainstorming session and someone says, how about this? And everyone goes, yeah, we can do that, maybe add this, and it's like an idea is being presented and you don't question it. Question storming, which is what a newsroom is 24/7, is like saying, yeah, but who's this for? Why does this matter? Are you sure you've done it right here? And journalists are paid, we're paid to argue, but we're paid to ask questions of each other. And we have such thick skins that we don't mind that. And so have a thicker skin, have a questioning mindset, and use AI as your most gifted intern ever, but don't allow your gifted intern to control the story. Does that help?
Absolutely. And I really like what I'm going to do right after this recording is suggest like such a session to my team, because I think that's a brilliant idea.
Okay.
I've never heard about it, so I'm very curious to try it out.
Well, get me in to do it. No, okay, no, you do it.
Let me try it first before I bring the real expert in, maybe. Cool. I think we have one left, if I count right. We're at 4 common mistakes. So the very last.
Yeah, we've done 4. That's right. We've done 4. Sorry.
Yes. The very last one that I have is treating storytelling as, well, not the last mile, but maybe the cherry on top of something. So I have been speaking to so many execs, and oftentimes I find them to treat storytelling as something that comes in the end to beautify or to dress up the analysis they did, the research that happened, and so on and so forth. Um, the ones that get it right build the story into how the research is actually designed right from the beginning, but I barely come across these. I could probably mention 3 names, which I'm not going to do now, but from people where I think that they are really in the habit of thinking it through right from the beginning. So I'm very curious, because you have such a broader perspective on this. You speak to so many more people about this topic, how you think about that habit, if you see that as well, treating it like the little cherry on top
Yeah.
of the cake.
So I see it slightly differently. Is that I see the problem as being silos. So what happens in companies is that different people and different teams come up with different stuff for a project, okay? And they don't necessarily collaborate until the end, or coalesce, you know what I mean? Join together until towards the end. So what I do is I encourage what I would call a newsroom culture. Let me give you an example. I work with a large UK bank, and every month, it's every 3 weeks, we have an hour-long session. So they've all done the storytelling training that I do. Okay, so they're all kind of aware of storytelling rules.
They have the foundations.
They have the foundations. And so we all gather, and it's kind of like maybe 15, 20 people in a room online, and it's a newsroom. So I'm the editor, and they are pitching stories to me. And so what happens when they pitch the story, and the story is all about data and insights and the work that they're going to be presenting to the board, is that everyone else on this call says, yeah, but what about this? Oh, hold on, we did this thing last month. Why don't we bring some of that back, right, and add it into the... So what happens is that because everyone is in pitch mode, to an outsider like me, or to somebody who is not necessarily truly invested with the story, or the politics, that's the other thing, internal politics, is that they are constantly thinking right from the beginning everyone is thinking what could be a good story. So it's no longer about silos. It's about everyone feeling that they can be a part of this newsroom culture. Now, the only difference between the real newsroom that I experienced and the newsrooms that I set up with businesses is that there is no swearing allowed. So so it can be quite a brutal environment in the real newsroom. And so I've obviously tamed that and toned it down a great deal, but it's the same principle. Okay, who's got the best story here? And when we've decided what the best story is, then everyone else can then continue. Yeah, but why don't we do it like this? How about this? So the short answer is to create a culture in which collaboration is there right from the beginning, not at the end when you've got this cherry on top and everyone looks at it and says, yeah, what about this and this and this? Do it right from the word go. And if you have and I think most organizations actually, and people working in insights and data are really lovely people, and they all are very collaborative. But if you have this, if you try to build a culture like that, in which everyone doesn't mind being questioned and gently challenged, I think it leads to better stories.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. I can relate to that. I also, again, took a lot of notes here. Wow, okay, we made it through the 5 common mistakes. You are probably able to name a lot of more mistakes that you see in all of your work. Again, you're the experts. But I would love to maybe wrap it up with getting, for all of us, including myself, getting your 2-minute or 2 sentences on what are the ingredients that make a great story.
Well, obviously a picture of me helps a great deal. That would kind of get people to... No, I'm joking. The ingredients of a great story are getting Okay, I'm sorry, you asked me for it in 2 minutes, okay? There's a phrase in journalism called a marmalade dropper, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want you to imagine a scene in which a couple are reading a newspaper over breakfast, and someone is buttering their bread and putting a dollop of marmalade onto their piece of toast, or, their bread or whatever, and they're so astonished by the story in front of them that the marmalade drops on the floor. In newsrooms, we talk about marmalade dropping stories. Like, these are stories with just everyone is going to pay attention to this, right? And you say, this is a real marmalade dropper. It's great. It's a great thing to think about, because a great story does not wait for the best bit to come. A great story has that marmalade dropping moment, insight, thought, piece of data right at the front. You've got to grab people's attention. We have such short attention spans. We have so many things competing for our attention. And if you expect somebody to wait a minute to find out what's important, it's too late. You have got 10 seconds. So a great story tells you within 10 seconds why it's important, what you need to know, and the decision that you are, and how it can help you make your decision. Now then, you can expand on it, and you can provide more material, and you can help flesh out the story. But if you do not succeed in the first 10 seconds, I think you're going to fail.
Yeah. Yeah, the marmalade dropper.
The marmalade dropper. The marmalade dropper. A marmalade dropper. Imagine,
That's amazing, yeah.
what do you have for breakfast? Maybe you have muesli. I have muesli, so I haven't had marmalade in a long time. However, a marmalade dropping moment is the thing that and by the way, every story has it. Sometimes people say, I know, but we haven't got the data is the same as last month, right? So there's no marmalade, and it's like, well, maybe that in itself is a marmalade dropper. It's like the dial hasn't changed, things haven't moved. Maybe we've invested lots of money and things are still the same the way that they are. And maybe if you look at a story and be journalistic and think, what's going on here? That there could be a marmalade dropper everywhere.
Yeah, that is such a fair point, because you are right. Many, many times we search or we think of creating a story only on the kind of data that is super surprising, or like numbers increasing fast or declining fast, or just very incremental changes, but not the things that stay the same, that may look the same. I think that's a great advice.
I recently had, I'm sorry, I know we're wrapping up, but I recently had an experience with a client in which they talked about trust being obviously really important, and how many people trusted the brand, and they buried this piece of data somewhere in the middle of the thing, because it was like, it showed that trust, the same levels of trust were apparent as they were 3 years ago. And so the dial hadn't moved, and so they didn't see that as a key piece of insight. And I said, but hold on a second, you're telling me that you've invested all of this time and money and effort in increasing trust value and increasing trust capital and making people trust your brand more, and so what you're saying is it hasn't changed, and so you don't think that that's a piece of information. That's like if I was the CEO and I was told, this 10 million campaign, it hasn't worked. Don't hide it. You've got to show something that people can help them make the business grow, and they buried it. And I said, actually, this is your marmalade dropper.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I would have probably tried to bury it as well, but thank you so much, Grant. This was such a fun session. I really enjoyed it. I took like 2 pages of notes here in front of me. I
Good.
hope that anyone who's listening to this also was able to take away. I hope you have been enjoying this conversation
Definitely
as much
loved
as I
it.
did.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm gonna leave you with that, and I'll speak to you soon.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.